All right, guys, welcome to our fifth lecture. We're going to be talking about human resource management the next couple of weeks. This one will be more specific to just the human resource process, and then next week will be kind of a hodgepodge of various topics that come up within human resources. I know for um, some of you during this time, this is probably not the ideal thing that we want to be talking about. We're living through crazy times and, times that aren't pleasant for some of our family members and a lot of worry and things like that. And so I'm going to go through it pretty quick and, we'll just kind of go from there. So, quick definition of human resource management is basically it's the process of everything around our employees. So planning for, attracting them, developing them, retaining them, and unfortunately sometimes having to let them go. A lot of things going on within the human resource process. A lot of stuff from our standpoint we really won't have to deal with. We're really more thinking about the kind of recruiting, selecting, maybe the orientation, definitely the evaluating, job analysis type stuff. We don't have to deal with as much of the health and safety type stuff. That's more dealt with in actual human resources department. But in the hiring process, guys, understand that some of you have been on a group of people or a committee hiring people. Some of you may not. Regardless, you're going to be on one end of this process multiple times in your life if you haven't already. But some things we're looking to understand is that we want to ask questions that are related to our job. There are a certain list of questions that you can't ask, so we want to stay to the legal questions. If we have general questions, we want to ask those to all the candidates that we have. Before we rush off and start looking for a new employee, we want to look at a job analysis so we know what it is we're actually trying to hire for. There are a lot of things that go into discrimination, things like that I haven't covered in here as much. But one thing I did want to talk about is that there's a concept of a bona fide occupational qualification. And what this is this is something that basically allows organizations to hire using, I don't know if using is the right concept, but using what would otherwise be considered discrimination. And what it is that it's the reasonably necessary type things that you have to be able to do in order to be able to get the job within an organization. And so one of the questions always comes up in pro sports is, does the salary cap discriminate against older players? Meaning that is being young and in shape a bona fide qualification in order to be able to be a professional athlete. And so just be aware that there are certain things within an organization that you have to be able to do. So in a human resources department, they're gonna be kind of on the front line helping hire new people. They orientate them. They keep up with records, legal stuff. They will file away performance appraisals. They are the ones who understand compensation. And they're also the people who are used to keep up with health and safety reports. They're also front and center when when an employee has to be terminated. So as we're starting to look at the human resources planning, we want to be strategic with what we're doing. Meaning that we want to hire and staff our organization with people who help meet our objectives. Okay, we don't want to be hiring just to be hiring. We want to be hiring people who are specifically trying to help us meet what we're trying to do. So this starts with a couple of processes. First, we're going to do a job analysis, and I think this is where people miss the boat. Is they're real quick to write a job description talking about what's going to get posted out there for people to see, but they don't really think about, well, what exactly do we want this position to be able to do? Is it one thing? Is it multiple things? And so their description sometimes doesn't fit what they really need the person to do. Farther into the process, we looked for job specifications. We're looking for things that are going to make some people qualified for the job and some people not qualified for the job. And then we start to get into the recruiting process of starting to attract candidates. That can be done a bunch of different ways. It can be done through word of mouth. Obviously, it's going to be posted on a website. It can be posted on big job boards. So understand that depending on what you're involved in, there's some jobs that are in higher demand than others. And so when we start to look at that recruiting process, it's really there's two options. There's an internal option where we try to promote from within. Maybe it's done on referrals from employees. Maybe it's done from people who have been previous applicants. And there's pros and cons to internal hiring. A pro is that it's cheaper, it's quicker. You're going to get somebody who is familiar with your organization and that you're familiar with. From an external deal, this is going to be people who we actually get through advertising, through reaching out. And the pros to this is that we may get a more diverse candidate pool. We're going to get maybe the opportunity to get new blood into our organization. The cons of it is going to be a longer process. You're going to have to go through a lot of bad candidates, and it's going to take more time. So we go into an interview, and you have to look at this from both perspectives. We're going to look at it from the perspective we're doing the interview, but for a lot of you need to look at the perspective from the other side. There's a couple different ways of going about this. There's kind of a structured, an unstructured, a semi-structured. Think about it as this: a structured interview is it's detail laid out. Every question is laid out. It's on a certain time frame, a certain time limit. Whereas unstructured would be kind of a fly by the seat of your pants, and semi-structured is right in between there. So I got to figure out what we're going to do for questions. Obviously, we're going to have some closed-ended questions. We're going to have some open-ended questions. We may have hypothetical questions. May be questions where we kind of nail them down and probe them a little bit. And we want to have those questions, for the most part, laid out before we go into the interview. And then let the interview take us where we want it to take us. So as we start to prepare for an interview, we want to make sure we review the job description, the specifications. We want to plan the type of interview that we want. We want to develop the questions. We might want to develop a form to evaluate people. And then we want to develop questions maybe for each candidate, meaning if we've kind of narrowed the process down to maybe our top 3 people, we may have some questions that are specific to just certain candidates. And so we want to understand that. As far as how the interview goes, we always want to have an open to the interview. We want to give a realistic expectations of the job. We want to ask questions. And then we maybe want to introduce the top candidates out to people within the department, maybe higher ups if that's needed. And then obviously we want to close out the interview. Before we go with this training methods, just a couple more things on interviewing. We always want to make sure, guys, that we're upfront with people, that we communicate with them. Particularly those top 3 candidates, whoever the 2 are that aren't getting the job, we got to reach out to those people and be upfront with them why we chose the other candidate. Sometimes they might ask us what they could have done better, and we need to be prepared to answer that. Because, again, all of you, if you haven't, you're going to be on the end of a job interview that you don't get, and it's frustrating. And you wonder why you didn't get it, and we want to be, as the people doing the hiring, we want to be prepared to be able to help these folks out. So another part of in management and in HR management is a lot of times we're responsible for training. Now, I think this is another thing where organizations miss the boat. They hire people to do a job, initially they'll tell them how to do the job, but I can't think of a whole lot of jobs where things don't change. And so you have to continually train your employees. I use the example of an athletic department. So let's say that we have an athletic department full of coaches and assistant coaches. Well, we're hiring those people because they can coach their sport. Well, we have to think about all the other things that might possibly come into their job that they might have to deal with. So they're going to have to be able to manage conflict. They're going to have to understand how to use social media. So that's just two examples. Well, we should be providing training for them on those types of things. One, it's going to help them develop professionally, but it's going to help our overall organization improve. So I'm going to go through these kind of fast. I post the non-audio version, but these are just different training methods we can go through. We can look at written stuff, lectures, discussions, demonstrations. I really, really like job rotation, where somebody has to go in and try a different job for a certain amount of time. We can do role-playing type stuff, behavior modification or modeling, potentially projects. We can do case studies. There are a ton of different ways, interactive videos. The key thing is we want to be training our employees constantly, because we want them to develop skills while they're there, and we want them to stay on top of what is expected within our industry. Last couple of things, guys, stuff that a lot of us will never deal with, but it's worth understanding, is potential that you may have to interact with unionized employees. My only really dealing of this has been when I was in graduate school. The first year I was in graduate school, we were so poor that I took a job at night unloading trucks for UPS. And that was obviously a unionized company. So it was the first time I really got to see that dynamic. But you hear a lot about people trying to unionize, professors trying to unionize, even athletes like at Northwestern trying to unionize. So I wanted to kind of go through a little bit of what that process looks like. So there's kind of this initial steps of organizing things. And then the first real, I don't know if roadblock is the right word, but you have to sign authorization cards. And if 30% of the employees don't sign, it's over right there. It doesn't go any farther. If more than 30% do sign, then you start to determine kind of the people are going to do the bargaining, how that's going to work. And you have an election of people who are going to head the union. If fewer than 50% people vote for the union, then the process ends. If more than 50% do vote for the union, then you go on to certification of the union. And so that's just a little bit of a process of how that starts to come about. Like I said, guys, it's a difficult process of being in human resources. And one of the things, particularly at this time, guys, it's really tough, is that people are getting laid off. They're losing their jobs. And so one thing that you're seeing some organizations do is outplacement services, where they're helping their employees find new jobs, or maybe find new jobs within the organization until it gets back up on their feet. A lot of times at this time, guys, when there's all this stuff going on, a lot of times you find out the organizations that truly care about their employees, because they're the ones that they're still trying to find ways to pay them. They're the ones still trying to find ways to keep them around, or if they're not keeping them around, they're trying to find ways to bring them back as soon as possible. So, like I said, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. One of the things I'm going to do this week is we're going to have 2 discussions, and one of those is going to be so you can give me an idea of some topics that maybe you want to know more about. Thanks a lot for all you're doing, guys.